Faced with so much blood and gore, many fainted. As Sophon walked forward, people hurried to back away. An invisible force field seemed to surround her, repelling the mob and keeping the space around her clear. She stopped after a few steps, and the crowd froze. Form a line, Sophon said. I was going to start singing the Oompa Loompa song.
Ooh, nice.
Which would have been a great...
That would be great.
But that's all right.
Oh, as I was sort of working away.
Yeah, it's
yes,
almost like the Jeopardy song. It has a similar sort of...
do 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 do.
They've got the same kind of like phrasing.
Yeah, you're right.
Timing.
Yeah. You can do this, but I cannot. Can you achieve some sort of mashup of the Oompa Loompa and Jeopardy themes? Like, not at the moment, not like I'm not asking you to perform.
It'd have to be like the Oompa Loompa lyrics to the Jeopardy melody. This is a particular hard musical thing to do, is put music, one set of lyrics with another melody. Let's see. Oompa Loompa, doo-ba-dee-doo. I have another story for you.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, okay.
Oompa loompa doopity-day. Da 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 da.
Boom
boom body doo. I could, with a little practice, I could do that. It would be kind of fun.
Yeah, I bet you could. I'm interested. I wonder, like this is definitely something like an electronic musician person could probably pull off. And I don't know.
There was a funny mashup like that I was doing the other day where I discovered two songs that I know quite well have like the exact same phrasing.
Oh, cool.
And I can't remember. One set of songs like that is "Girls in Summer Clothes." The Rising by Bruce Springsteen and this bird can see, but you don't have me. You don't have me. You want it. And Your Bird Can Sing by the Beatles and The Rising have almost like the exact same. So you can you can sing one to the other.
That's cool.
But there's a really funny example of that I was doing the other day, and I can't remember what it was, but it was something terribly inappropriate, like singing like Wind Beneath My Wings to like Blurred Lines or something like that. But not literally that, but
yeah, but something along that in that era.
You're my hero.
It's like you're mashing up. Like if like somehow I Can't Make You Love Me and like a Gwar song had similar phrasing. Let's not forget that Gwar, despite all of their pageantry, are like a true force for good in the world.
Don't really know much about them other than just sort of inclusion and urine. Mm-hmm. That's about what and spikes
and like a strong sort of like. Not aggressively socialist, but like equality is a good idea, kind of thing. They are really, they are champions of some of those ideals. They simply express it in an interesting way, full of paper mache and fake semen.
Yep. Yeah. Again, not super familiar. I have a thin familiarity with. I don't have a deep familiarity, which sounds like it's probably a good thing given the fake semen.
I don't know. It's pretty great. You should watch their Tiny Desk concert because you have a connection with NPR and like seeing the members of Gwar in full battle regalia stuffed into the NPR music is pretty wonderful.
Sounds amazing. Yeah, it is interesting how like I feel like there's lots of people. The Tiny Desk concerts have become such their own thing that there are many people who know what they are and don't have any idea what NPR is at this point.
Yeah, I can see that. That makes sense.
Yeah, I was watching Olivia Rodrigo's Tiny Desk concert the other night, which is very good.
I bet that was really good.
And I felt like for her, it's not that she doesn't necessarily know what NPR is, but the Tiny Desk for her is like a very important stage. But anyway, let's talk about we got to talk about this book. I got to cook some dinner. So we're talking about the third book in the trilogy, Death's End. This is part 1. It is a very long book with a complicated plot, but we're going to keep it tight by just focusing on the major plot lines. Do you want to do the sort of opening skit, the cold open, as it were?
The cold open of the book?
Yeah, the Byzantium.
Okay, sorry.
It's prelude.
Right.
It feels like, to me, it feels like a cold open. It feels like, it feels like the, I don't know, the Italian painter in a duel scene from Ripley, or something like that.
Totally. Yeah, and the inclusion of which is only just beginning to be hinted at
in the very last chapter of the first half, roughly. 350 pages in, you now understand what's going on, sort of.
Be like, okay. But yeah, we do open in Byzantium in the 15th century. The Ottoman Empire is besieging the city. The emperor sort of figures that the jig is up. But one of his counselors brings a woman named Helena to him and says that I think she might actually be able to do magic. There's a wonderful moment when the emperor's like, in Europe, we already would have burnt you at the stake. And she is given a chance to prove the fact that she can do magic. She's supposed to kind of kill a prisoner from a distance in order to prove that she can do that also to the Ottoman emperor, the Sultan. She is successful at killing the prisoner. She sort of excises his brain at a remote distance.
And puts it in a bag.
But then she is unsuccessful at doing the same to the Sultan, and she is killed by the emperor, one of his guards, as the city is beginning to fall. And we get this little detail that she was really able to do magic, but the age of magic on Earth only lasted for 25 days. And like a lot of details in this book, that sort of disappears, but it is important to hold on to it because he did a good enough job of laying that foundation that when the events at the end of this section we read started to pay off, I went,
Yep. Yeah, it does pay off. It is not a stranded detail. So then in the present is actually more or less the present. We go back. Yep. We're now concurrent with the last book in Luoji. In fact, there's a moment where a couple of the characters of this book like bump into Luoji at the UN, when he's walking the other direction. But we first meet Yun Tianmeng, who is a young man who has not had a lot of luck. He goes to college. He's not considered very attractive. He is shy. He doesn't do well with women, and he falls in love with a beautiful and brilliant young scientist named Cheng Xin, who is very kind to him but doesn't love him. And Yun Tianming has this idea for a grass tea drink that gets his friend rich, but he doesn't benefit from it. Instead, he gets cancer. It's not his friend's fault, and he's gonna die. And we learn that basically his sister wants him to euthanize himself because he's spending a lot of the family inheritance on expensive, medical care that's not going to keep him alive anyway. And he's like, okay, fine, I will euthanize myself. There's this new law that lets me do it. But he does have some money because his friend is very grateful for being turned into a beverage billionaire through the grass drink. Gives him a big chunk of money, and it's enough for him to buy a star, which is the way the UN or some agency is like raising money for the sword holder program or for other things like that. They're selling stars. He gets what is understood to be a crappy star without any planets, and it's really far away, but it's a star, and then he secretly gives it to his secret love, Cheng Xin. She is very touched by this, and she doesn't know who does it, but she has been hired by, what is it? Basically, it's like the CIA. Yeah, the People's Intelligence Agency.
Planetary Intelligence Agency.
It's basically the CIA for the world. There's this leader, Wade, who is a hard-assed, aggressive, cruel, ruthless leader who hires Cheng Xin, the beautiful, talented young scientist, and she comes up with an idea to send a probe to the Trisolaran fleet. It involves basically using spent nuclear bombs as a propulsion in a very, very clever way we don't need to explain, called the staircase program. It's a really good idea, but basically you can only send about 5 kilograms. And they're like, well, we were going to send a person to spy on the Trisolarans. That's not going to work. We need to send a brain. We need to send a living brain. Who do we know that isn't going to need their brain?
We can't send a living brain, actually. We have to send a brain and rely on the Trisolarans' advanced technology to reanimate it.
They freeze it, right? So essentially what ends up happening is Cheng Xin goes to poor Yan Qianming and says, don't kill yourself. Well, actually do, but do it for our program. We want to send your brain to the Trisolaran fleet, where hopefully, if all goes well, they will recreate your body from your DNA and you can spy on them and send us a message. He agrees.
As they torture you forever.
Well, that's what he's worried about. And he hates the idea, but he agrees because he loves her. And then at the very last minute, she discovers that he's the one who sent the star and feels really guilty about it, but it's too late. And poor Yan Qianming's brain gets sent into space. And Cheng Xin goes into hibernation to wake up closer to the crisis era in order to participate in kind of the crisis. And that moves us on more or less to the next little plot, the sword holder plot.
The sword holder plot, yes. In another one of these sort of like... these books sort of bristle with plot elements that you're not sure are going to pay off or not.
Yeah.
I can't remember if it's as she is going into hibernation or as she wakes up. We get the heartbreaking detail that something goes wrong with the probe, and it very quickly diverts off course and is just lost to the depths of the universe. It goes the wrong way.
Although, remember the Trisolarans were also diverted. Mm-hmm. So who knows what might happen in the fullness of time.
And it is like, you can really sense, you're like, okay, he would not have spent this much time on that if this were not going to pay off at some point. Mm-hmm. But Cheng Xin does wake up about 50 years after the end of the Dark Forest.
Right.
We're basically 260 years after the beginning of the Trisolaran crisis.
Deterrence era.
The deterrence era. And humanity has enjoyed about a half century of relative peace. The Trisolarans are sort of diverting away from the solar system. Humanity has launched one spaceship, Gravity, after Blue Space to kind of track it down. As you pointed out in the beginning, there's this horrible detail when one of the other ships returns to Earth.
Bronze Age is suckered back
Bronze
to Earth.
Age. They are promised that they're going to be heroes. There's like big holographic projections of like shouting and screaming crowds that are happy to have them home. Nope, it's all a fake. They're all tried for basically mass murder, and they are all imprisoned. Luo Ji, our hero from the last book, is still alive, and we learn that he enjoyed about 2 years of peace before he was again pulled back in. I keep trying to get away, and they just keep pulling me back in. And he has been what is called the sword holder, which is basically the person who is in charge of setting off the big sun antenna and broadcasting the location of the solar system and Trisolaris to the universe, probably effectively destroying both of them. He has been hanging out basically underground in a bunker 45 kilometers underneath the surface of the Earth, staring at the wall for 50 years. And Cheng Xin is elected to be the next sword holder. She beats out 6 other men. There's an odd like subcurrent of something is going on in this book about femininity and masculinity that I haven't quite been able to put my finger on yet. At the moment, it feels a little unsavory, but I'm trying to give him the benefit of the doubt to see if something comes of all of it. She is elected sword holder, and mostly because she feels like she can be a nurturer of the human race if she is in charge of deterrence. The moment it changes hands, Luo Ji basically hands her the switch that would enact the sun antenna. which is now no longer powered by a bunch of nuclear bombs. It's now powered by like gravitational wave transmission. There's a whole bunch of technical details in there that are important to the plot, but not important to this recap. And as soon as it changes over, Trisolaris launches an attack on the Earth with the droplets, betting that Cixin won't be able to do it. They are right. She doesn't enact the transmission. All of the gravitational wave transmitters are destroyed by droplets. And Trisolaris, led by the amazing character Sophon, who is this like AI ninja robot, basically takes over the world. There's this great detail when Sophon says something like, "Get ready to move to Australia." And Australia is turned into the world's penal colony, and 4.1 billion people are resettled in Australia with all of the chaos that you might expect. And we finally learned that the Trisolarans' ultimate plan is that they are going to restrict food on Australia, and the 30 to 50 million humans who are okay with eating each other are going to be the humanity that is left. And so that's one of the big arcs there. Cixin meets Wade in this era. He is also hibernated. She has befriended a character named AA and then another character named Phrase. Let's call him Phrase.
I think is right.
And she does a very kind thing where she gets them evacuated when all of the shit is going down. She is a deeply compassionate character, though flawed.
So, yeah, and I think two things. We could talk about sexual politics, probably. But I think one of the themes here that's really important to understand what you just said is that Liu is showing us a human society whose values are evolving in reaction to events. And I think what we're meant to understand is that after 50 years, humans have taken deterrence for granted, and there is a tremendous optimism in humanity's ability to forge kind of a dual civilization with Trisolaris. And so it's very much sexualized and genderized, and I don't know that it has to be. It is this theme, and we saw it with Luoji and the attitudes towards Luoji that he really wants to explore, which is how these big traumatic events can change humanity's attitudes. And so that's also the reason that Blue Earth is being pursued and Bronze Age was suckered back to the Earth. You remember at first when Zhang Beihai led those ships away, everybody was like, oh, thank God. Zhang Beihai isn't a traitor. He saved our ships. He saved humanity. But now that deterrence has been assured, they're like, oh, these are traitors. And they had the Battle of Darkness and they destroyed each other. There's something other than humans. We have to destroy them. And you said that all the gravitational antennas had been destroyed, but that's not entirely accurate. All but one were destroyed. So you took us through a lot of the post-deterrence genocide plot. There are a lot of incredible details in that we can skip. But man, all of humanity moving to Australia and trying to rebuild their life there. Some of humanity becoming these like sort of traitorous enforcers working for Sophon. Sophon, the just ambivalence of Sophon, her but Cheng Jin and I would say the reader sort of love her and hate her at the same time. That's really fascinating. But the kind of final plot here is, okay, the humans are basically going to be forced to eat each other until there's so few left, probably that they can't be a military threat against Trisolaris. It's hideous. It's awful. It's about to happen. Then we cut back to the chase. So Gravity is a spaceship that has been chasing Blue Earth for 50 years. It's a 50-year chase where both of the crews of these giant spaceships spend most of their time in hibernation. So to most of them, only 3 or 4 years have gone by. Although there's one character who is based on the cook in The Hunt for Red October.
Totally. I was like, it's the cook.
It's the goddamn cook. Who experiences the entire time and ages quickly, but he has the benefit of getting to date lots of different women as they come off their ships. It's just one of those funny Cixin Liu details. But the chase, essentially, Blue Earth has the advantage because they have 2 of these droplets, the strong interaction probes with them, and they have way more fuel. Sorry, gravity has the advantage. They can go a lot. The gravity, the chaser, the one trying to bring Blue Earth back to justice, can go a lot faster than Blue Earth. But gravity also has one of these universal antennas. So there's still a chance for them to send a signal. The, catastrophic deterrence signal, mutually assured destruction. They have the nuclear codes, basically. So they're chasing, and they are just about to catch Blue Earth. They're pretty damn close at this point, and they've been signaling and be like, give up, come on back with us, we'll give you a fair trial. Blue Earth's like, well, we'll send you some of our officers, but we're going to keep going. So they're going back and forth, and then the probes attack because this is the same moment that the sword holder switch is happening, and the probes have been programmed to attack. But the attack has been diverted. We see it from the perspective of gravity, and then in several sort of expositional chapters, we learn that Blue Earth has shipped into a fourth dimension fragment and has gained the ability to kind of move through four-dimensional space and interact with three-dimensional space through four dimensions, such that they are now able to destroy the droplet probes no problem, and they're able to basically teleport themselves onto gravity and take it over. So they do that, they quickly subdue gravity, but then they also get gravity onto their side because they're like, look, the droplets just attacked all of us. Trisolarans has betrayed us. So we got to stick together, and essentially gravity agrees with this, and they form one big super crew, and the first thing they do is vote whether or not to send the universal signal, the broadcast that will basically reveal Trisolarans' location and very likely Earth's location to the dark forest, such that somebody will probably destroy both of those star systems. And they vote overwhelmingly to do it. There's an amazing scene where they have to make the last vote, and all of the crew sort of hog pile on top of each other so that they're all pushing the button at the same time. The signal is sent, and we learn on Earth that it works. And the genocide is averted. Trisolaran fleet is diverted. We don't really hear what happens to humanity yet, but it's a huge relief. They're not going to have to eat each other. They get to go back to the rest of the continents. And then we get this really interesting expositional chapter about Blue Earth's discovery of the fourth dimensional fragment. That's very difficult to explain, but all you really need to know is that we're starting to get a sense that there are a lot of other civilizations out there, and that there probably are more of these fourth dimensional fragments, and maybe there's something happening to the universe that at one point they encounter this tomb for a fourth dimensional civilization, and it's revealed that essentially the fourth dimensional habitat for these creatures is like a puddle, and it used to be an ocean, and the puddle is drying up. And that's basically the end of the section we read to.
Yeah. I loved that section when they were talking to that alien tomb.
It's amazing.
It's just wonderful, touching, weird, everything you want out of a supposed alien interaction. But you got a question about Sophon here.
Yeah, I think the first thing I want to do is give us a reading. There are a number of wonderful Sophon moments. When I say favorite, they're always sort of like, well, it is delightfully creepy. So this is a scene in Australia before the genocide has been announced, when Sophon is basically telling humanity, look, you're going to have to go to Australia, and that's going to suck, but don't worry, you just have to hold out for a few months, and then we'll get you some food. So there are a bunch of people on Australia, essentially refugees, and there are shipments of food being flown in, and a shipment lands, and the refugees all just like swarm the food, and Sophon's in the plane, and she's this like ninja robot who is a beautiful woman with a katana, and she leaps out and she starts telling the refugees to form a line, but they ignore her. And so I'm going to start the reading. Sophon is looking at essentially the other administrators of this food, like the UN administrators, and scolding them first. You useless things, why aren't you out here keeping order? Sophon lifted her face and shouted at the transport. In the open door of the transport stood a few shocked officials from the UN Resettlement Commission. Where are your armies? Your police? What about the weapons we allowed you to bring here? Where is your responsibility? The chair of the Resettlement Commission stood at the door of the transport. He held onto the doorframe with one hand for support and waved his other hand at Sophon, shaking his hand helplessly. Sophon unsheathed her katana. Moving faster than the eye could see, she swung it 3 times and sliced 3 of the men climbing up the pile into 6 pieces. The 3 killing strokes were exactly the same, beginning at the left shoulder and ending at the right hip. The 6 pieces fell, and the viscera spilled out midair to land with a shower of blood among the rest of the people. Amidst screams of terror, she leapt from the pile and landed with her sword swinging, quickly killing more than a dozen individuals around her. The refugees shied away from her as though a drop of detergent had been deposited into the oil film over a dirty bowl, quickly clearing out a space around her. The bodies left behind in that empty space were also split from the left shoulder to the right hip, a method that guaranteed the maximum spilling of organs and blood. Faced with so much blood and gore, many fainted. As Sophon walked forward, people hurried to back away. An invisible force field seemed to surround her, repelling the mob and keeping the space around her clear. She stopped after a few steps, and the crowd froze. Form a line, Sophon said. Her voice was soft. The chaotic mob quickly organized itself into a long, winding line, as though people were reenacting an array sorting algorithm. The line extended to the gigantic tent and wound around it. Sophon jumped back into the pile and pointed at the line with her bloody katana. The era for humanity's degenerate freedom is over. If you want to survive here, you must relearn collectivism and retrieve the dignity of your race. End of excerpt.
God, all great sci-fi books need a charismatic, badass villain. We got Raven here. We got the Vat-grown ninja from Neuromancer. I mean, we have HAL 9000. She's great. She's another, I think when you're creating that character, you basically just need to unshackle your imagination and let it roll. And she's great, she's beautiful, deadly. She's very often described as sort of this otherworldly beauty that you really can't place your finger on it.
Yeah.
She's a great invention. She's a lot of fun.
Well, and I mean, you kind of answered the question I was going to ask already, which is what does she get us? And I'll note the HBO 3-Body Problem series brings in Sophon, as I understand it, right away, sort of in the midst of the events of the first book, which is, I'm not sure how that's going to work in the plot.
Yeah.
But our friend Ben was talking about it and was talking about how they were trying to kind of amp up the excitement. And I think that was one of the strategies. Why? It to me, it sort of feels as though 3 books in, Cixin Liu discovered something, finally sort of figured out a way. I mean, there's interesting personifications of the Trisolarans earlier, but I feel like this ups the stakes in an interesting way. And I'm just curious, what do you think? What do you think she gets us, other than, yes, having a charismatic badass is good?
Well, yeah, I mean, the charismatic badass part is the processed sugar of a sci-fi installation.
Yeah.
It's a quick hit. It helps. It drives engagement. It's sexy. It's fun. It's dangerous. It's all that stuff.
Yeah.
So we get that, which is fine. That's fun.
Yep.
I think what's happening here, I think what Cixin Liu is after is, this question of opposition versus coming together is I think one of the big questions of the first half of this book. Are the Trisolarans and the humans going to remain opposed, two fists?
Yeah.
Are they going to shake hands? And there's this fascinating, very short detail about the way that like almost all of the great movies of this time are set on the Earth and employ Earth-based characters and are all created by Trisolarans who are still like 2 light years away.
Yeah.
And
there are all these like happy, romantic, epic romantic stories too. Yeah.
And so, Trisolaris is also being affected and changed by the commingling of these cultures.
Right.
And one of the big things that's happening to humanity is that there is this change in the way that men appear. There's kind of this drive towards this sort of feminine appearance.
Right.
Changxin, when she awakes, can't distinguish men from women for a little bit, and then she's able to kind of figure it out.
Men are all like metrosexuals with long. They're all like David Beckhams.
She describes them as like she clearly like listened to K-pop at some point in her history and describes them as sort of like South Korean K-pop boy bands who are like incredibly attractive, and so I think what is going on is that part of the Trisolarans plot here is that they are actively engaged in sort of lulling the humans into a state of where they can get the upper hand back.
Yeah.
We learned that the Trisolarans believe that they've missed a real strategic opportunity to destroy the bombs before Liu Ji kind of got them into place.
They're waiting for a shot, to regain the upper hand. And, it's interesting, too, because the way that Sophon initially kind of earns the trust of Cixin before revealing is through this Japanese tea ceremony. Being incredible. And she also says, like, I think the world needs to be in the hands of women like us, like me and you.
Yes.
And you're like, you're not a woman, you're a robot controlled by a bunch of Trisolarans. And Cixin knows that, but she thinks that this is a genuine expression of the Trisolarans' future intent, which it turns out not to be. But it's also like all great acting, it probably is wrapped up in a little bit of truth, right? That Sophon always, no matter what happens in the plot, claims to love humanity and human culture. Mm-hmm. And in the section I just read for you, what does she say? She doesn't say you're barbarians, you're beasts, you're bugs. She says something like, reclaim your culture's greatness. Relearn collectivism. The era for humanity's degenerate freedom is over. If you want to survive here, you must relearn collectivism and retrieve the dignity of your race.
I think the big line there is, where is your responsibility?
Yeah.
I think that's the one that really like jumped out at me. And like, I think that's where he's going with this like feminized direction. The other 6 sword holders are all men, and they're all men from the Common Era.
Yep.
And they're all sort of depicted as these sort of brutish, thuggish, violent louts. And I think what's happening here is that Cixin thinks that she is going to save the world by being a nurturer. And it ends up that what she actually needed to be was a warrior in Luo Ji's case. And Wade, the man from the Common Era who turned out, he tries to kill Chen Jing at one point. The Trisolarans figured out that he would have been like 100% effective as in the deterrence thing. And so I think there's this amazing manipulation of human culture that is going on. And Sophon is the avatar of that.
And I'll just say, too, like, I don't necessarily think that idea would be bad. I think it's a fascinating idea on its own, the idea that humanity has evolved a kind of complacency and has evolved a set of values that are not suitable for the standoff with Trisolaris. I do think there's questions to be raised about genderizing it so much or sexualizing it so much. Now, it might be that might be, I don't know. There's a lot of things that could be going on there. He could be making an observation about how society labels certain qualities as feminine and labels other qualities as masculine, and how different ideas, I mean, you do see that gender roles are shifting, and it's not like Cixin is not brilliant, it's not like, but it does, her nurturing quality proves to be the wrong strength for this situation, at the very least, and maybe raises the question that is it a form of weakness? I think that's an open question that we can go into the second half of the book asking. Is Cixin a weak character or not? I definitely think he wants us to grapple with it because the characters are grappling with this. She's grappling with it. Wade is grappling with it. Luoji sort of stands as a foil. Wade stands as a foil. The other possible sword holders stand as a foil. But yeah, we're certainly getting the question of, I mean, it really reminds me of the John Ford Westerns. We've talked about The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance before. Like, Wade is the sort of character that John Wayne plays, which is a character who's not really compatible with civilization, but you kind of need to preserve civilization.
Yeah, totally. I think, I mean, there were a few moments where like the word feminized or feminine just kind of got dropped into a description or a sentence that like didn't really feel like it needed to be there. Although I think everything we're talking about is intentional. And like you just said, he wants us to wrestle with these ideas. And I think my struggle with it is that, this kind of goes back to what we were talking about last time. This trilogy is just a fantastic smorgasbord of brilliant ideas and imaginations. And he, like, one of the passages that we brought from his like primary source material is him basically saying like, what I want is just imagination. Like, that's the thing. And so sometimes to get to that level of idea, you have to employ some shorthand. And so sometimes he is slapping descriptors and labels on things without giving them their sort of full expression. And we talked about this last time. If he did, these books would be so long as to probably be really unmarketable.
And I will say, like, I actually think, I don't know if you experience it this way, I think this first half is a real improvement over the first half of The Dark Forest. You're giving me the thumbs up. In that, A, there's more action, and B, the characters, even though you could argue that Wade is a sort of symbolic character and Cixin is a symbolic character, I feel like the characters are developed better than they are than, I mean, the sword holder candidates sort of remind me of the other wall facers and their two-dimensionality. But I think Wade is a really interesting character. I think Cixin is a very interesting character. AA is kind of, I mean, she reminds me of the I forget her name, but the bounty hunter in Cowboy Bebop.
Edward?
Not Edward, the one with her own ship, sort of.
Oh, May.
Yeah, May. She reminds me of May, sort of this like scrappy, pretty sort of little sister type, so, and there's also just way more action in the first half of this book. Like the last book, you basically, all the interesting stuff happened in the second half. We're in the first half, and a ton of interesting stuff has happened in addition to sort of the big ideas. And it might very well be sexist. I'm not saying it's not. I think the more interesting idea, though, that I think is fascinating to explore is, do cultural values shift over time as a response to cultural trauma? And so it reminds me of the fascinating moment in the 1960s where you have the American anti-war movement reacting to the Vietnam War, and the parents who fought World War II, which is what established kind of the American hegemony, and I would argue was a pretty just war from America's point of view, are having a hard time grappling around that. And so, the men might look feminized to the men who came of age in the 1940s and the 50s. They have long hair, they're wearing sandals and love beads, and they're anti-war. And I think, he's playing with that kind of, this is what happens over generations. We react to historical events, and maybe we overreact, and then we overreact to the overreaction once we learned that we overreact, you know, and we're seeing that throughout. We see it again sort of at the end of this moment. And I do find that theme really, really interesting, even if it is rendered in a way that comes across as sexist.
Yeah, and like you, I think the verdict on the sexism, like we can leave that for the second half of the book.
Yeah.
But I found myself, just thinking about what you just said, of the idea that the course of history is rarely a straight line.
Yeah.
That it is a stumbling back and forth between cultural and social values.
Yep.
And that stumbling eventually creates the direction of the culture.
Yeah.
And, and that's just a fantastically interesting thing to explore. And lots of people have explored it before, that like our present moment is simply the result of like best intentions and terrible mistakes.
Yeah.
And the mixture of that is, you cannot predict the outcome of it, and you kind of have to just do your best and see what it eventually results in.
I found myself this week, I think in response to this book and thinking about it, reading several articles about what Robert McNamara, Kennedy, and Johnson all thought about why they had to propagate the Vietnam War. And basically they thought that they didn't really see that war as a civil war between two factions in Vietnam. They saw it as a manifestation of Chinese communist aggression in trying to take over the whole region, which, was inaccurate. The Chinese did help the North Vietnamese, but we were helping the South Vietnamese. But it was something that started organically, and they really thought that, Johnson and McNamara and Kennedy really thought that. And it was a horrible miscalculation. And I think the anti-war movement was a accurate and correct corrective to all that. But I think you're absolutely right that what he's exploring here is society bouncing back and forth between extremes, and those extremes manifesting at times as strengths and at times as weaknesses, and sometimes you might need a Wade and what you get is a Chung Shin. At other times you might need a Chung Shin and what you get is a Wade. And I don't think that Cixin Liu is saying that one of them is right or wrong. I think he's observing exactly what you do, which is that we kind of stagger our way back and forth through extremes, and that staggering creates a kind of historical trajectory.
We are wandering through a dark forest.
Yeah.
Doing our best, not being able to turn the lights on.
Yeah.
So I've got a reading that I think picks up nicely from what we were just talking about, because one of the things that you and I keep talking about in this book is basically the architecture has to be pretty ornate in order to get to the big ideas that he's after. And, because one of my tastes is drawn a little bit more towards the emotional realism kind of place, that some of the passages of the book or sections of the book I find, sort of like, okay, this is here to achieve a thing.
Yep.
Fine. Cool. When Yun Tianming is in the process of euthanizing himself, the conceit is, and this totally makes sense, that if you did have a system where people are actively selecting to kill themselves, the way the system works is that you are given the same question 5 times. Do you want to end your life? And then you have to pick a different number. It says press 5 if yes, press 0 if no.
Yeah.
And the no is always 0. But the number keeps changing so that the person can't just
Actually, it's anything other than the correct number is considered a no, I believe.
Exactly. Yeah. And what Cixin Liu does in this section, and I was like, I am pretty sure this is exactly what would happen, is every time Yun Tianming is faced with this question, do you want to end your life? He muses on a particular moment in his personal history.
Yeah.
And it is heartbreaking and beautiful.
Yeah. And you get like a 20-page biography of him in a span that's supposed to take 3 minutes or something like that too.
Yeah, so there's a real compression of emotion, and it feels, it's one of these moments, like this book is so ambitious, and because it's so ambitious, the scope and the architecture of it similarly has to be really big. This was like this was so up my alley. This was like a personal, small moment of like quiet, devastating reflection. Yeah. I'm not going to read all of it, but I am going to read the 4th section. And the way that this is the 4th time that he hits the correct number. Do you wish to terminate your life? For yes, select 1. For no, select 0. By the time his lung cancer was discovered, it was already too late. Maybe there had been an earlier misdiagnosis. Lung cancer was one of those cancers that spread fast in the body, so he didn't have much time left. As he left the hospital, he wasn't scared. The only emotion he felt was loneliness. His alienation had been building up, but had been held back by an invisible dam. It was the kind of equilibrium that he could endure. But now the dam had collapsed, and the weight of years of accumulated loneliness overwhelmed him like a dark ocean.
Yeah.
He could not bear it. He wanted to see Cixin. Without hesitation, he bought a plane ticket and flew to Shanghai that afternoon. By the time his taxi arrived at his destination, his fervor had cooled somewhat. He told himself that, as somebody about to die, he shouldn't bother her. He wouldn't even let her know of his presence. He just wanted to look at her once from afar, like a drowning man struggling to take one last breath before sinking down forever. Standing in front of the gate to the Academy of Spaceflight Technology, he calmed down even more. He saw how irrational his own actions of the past few hours had been. Even if Cixin had gone on to obtain a PhD, she would be finished with her studies by now, and she might not even be working here. He spoke to the guard in front of the door and found out that there were more than 20,000 people working at the academy, and he had to know the exact department if he wanted to find someone. He had lost touch with his classmates, and he had no more information to give the guard. He felt weak and out of breath, and he sat down a little ways from the gate. It was still possible that Cixin did work here. It was almost the end of the workday, and if he waited here, he might see her. The gate to the academy complex was very wide. Large golden characters engraved into the short black wall next to it gave the formal name for the place, which had expanded greatly since its early days. Wouldn't such a large complex have more than one entrance? With an effort, he got up and asked the guard again. Indeed, there were 4 more entrances. Slowly, he walked back to his place, sat down, and waited. He had no other choice. The odds were against him. Cixin would still have to be working here after graduation, to be at the office instead of away on business, to pick this door as opposed to 4 others when she got out of work. This moment resembled the rest of his life, a dedicated watch for a slim, slim ray of hope. It was the end of the workday. People began to depart the complex, some walking, some on bikes, some in cars. The stream of people and vehicles grew and then shrank. After an hour, only a few stragglers remained. Cixin never passed. He was certain that he would not have missed her, even if she drove. That meant she was no longer working here, or maybe she hadn't come to work today, or maybe she had used another entrance. The setting sun stretched out the shadows of buildings and trees like numerous arms extended toward him in pity. He remained where it was until it was completely dark. He didn't remember how he managed to hail a taxi to bring him to the airport, how he flew back to his city, how he returned to his company-owned single dormitory. He felt he was already dead. He pressed 1. It's like fucking Chekhov.
Yeah. Yeah.
That image of the tree shadows reaching out to either embrace him or, swallow him whole.
Yeah.
It's so good, and all of them are like that. It was really hard for me to pick.
Yeah, that whole section. Yeah, and you're right that one of the things, this is not entirely related to what you're saying. It's related, but it's indirectly related, is One of the things I like about this book is that now he's this new device of this memoir or history called like Excerpts of Lost Time or something like that.
Yeah, totally.
So you do get these sections though in a way that like there are certain parts where it's just like we're gonna just do analysis and exposition, so you don't have to freight the characters with that and don't have to have the characters be like, "Oh, Luo, my boy, let me explain what happened to you in the last 75 years since the Great Ravine." Da 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 da. You know, like we don't have to like pretend. And I think what that does is I think there's a much higher volume of just the emotional stakes of the circumstances that Cixin Liu is imagining being experienced by characters kind of at their full horror, at their full depression. Often there's moments of hopelessness broken by sudden last-minute hope. That's definitely a thing he likes to do. I don't know if that's a Chinese thing, but it feels it's also kind of Spielbergian, right? You know, like we don't blow up the shark until the orca is about to go right into the water. You know, with the very last bullet and the very last shot. There's a lot of that. Yeah, you get this really full portrait of this character, Yan Tianming, who makes these sort of unspeakable decisions in a way that I think ultimately feels very convincing, and you feel like you know him completely by the time his poor brain is sent out to outer space in like the ultimate Hail Mary.
I'm really, you know, I found myself while I was away from this book being like, I can't wait to get back to that book.
Yeah.
And like that's the feeling that you want to make in your readers. You know, that's the goal. And coming off of, you know, what I found to be a lot of like stage direction of the middle book, I think you're right. He has sort of figured out some things. Yeah. And you get the kind of sense that, like, you know, because book one was small enough and there was a lot of character.
It's weird because it feels huge. And it's tiny. The scope is
small.
Tiny compared to this one.
And this is still a big, complicated book with a lot of complicated scientific ideas that you really need to pay attention to. But it is quite a bit more balanced in terms of the small. I don't even know if we can call them human moments anymore.
Yeah,
because we see tenderness from all three of the races that we experience. The ring in outer space is like, you have a fish. And one of the characters that's like going along is like, oh shit, that's right. I can see into the fourth dimension. I have this tiny little terrarium. And it's like, can you give me the fish? Yeah. I like fish.
And also like your little rolled up portraits, you're gonna die here, you need to go back to your world too. And I guess this is actually like, that sort of sets up my next reading and question. Do you mind if I go there? This question of tenderness. So you described the scene in the Parliament where Sophon in Australia is announcing what's going on. And while this is happening, the like human soldiers hired by the Trisolarans are blowing up the power plants. So the humans won't have any electrical production. So they won't be able to use electricity to generate enough food. You know, it was going to be hard putting everybody on Australia, but there was a plan. They were going to make it work. And now we've got 4.2 billion humans on this continent, and probably the only way they're going to survive is if they eat each other, and there'll be 50 million left. So Sophon she hasn't quite announced this yet. So she's explaining this into the Parliament, and what's happening is dawning on everybody. The plan had been premised on highly efficient agricultural factories. During the resettlement process, large numbers of agricultural factories had been relocated to Australia, and many of them had been reassembled and put in operation. In these factories, genetically modified crops grew at rates orders of magnitude above traditional crops, but natural lighting was insufficient to power such growth, so ultra-bright artificial lights had to be used. This required massive amounts of electricity. Without electricity, the crops in the growth tanks of the factories, dependent on ultraviolet or X-ray light for photosynthesis, would rot in a couple of days. The existing food reserve was enough to maintain 4.2 billion people for only 1 month. Someone has yelled out, "This is genocide," and Sophon's reacting to this. I don't understand your reaction, Sophon says to the man who had yelled genocide. Her confusion appeared genuine. What about food? Where are we going to get food? Someone else shouted. They were no longer terrified of Sophon. All that was left was despair. Sophon scanned the hall, meeting the eyes of everyone present. Food? Everyone, look around. You are surrounded by food. Living food. Her tone was serene, as though reminding humanity of a storehouse they had forgotten. No one said anything. The long-planned process of annihilation had reached its final step. It was too late for words. Sophon continued. The coming struggle for survival will eliminate most of humanity. By the time the fleet arrives in 3 months, there should be about 30 to 50 million people left on this continent. These final victors will begin a free and civilized life in the reservation. The fire of Earth's civilization will not go out, but it will continue in a reduced form, like the eternal flame at a tomb. I will stop it there, although somewhere in this section too, Sophon says something to the effect of, you should all feel lucky. We could have completely annihilated you, but we didn't because we love your civilization, and that's why we're going to keep it alive. So I guess my question for you here is, are the Trisolarans evil?
Gosh, so one of the things that's happening here, and this happens a lot throughout these books, is like we do get the language that has been deployed by fascistic autocracy,
Imperial,
totalitarian, colonial. This like we are don't you see the positive things that we are bringing? Mm-hmm. And eliding the huge numbers of humans that have to die to achieve that paradise for the conquerors or the colonizers, essentially. And so there's a lot of that in her speech. Like it's anybody who has a passing familiarity with the speeches of autocrats will recognize, the plays there. Are they good or evil? It's a hard one. I think one of the good things that this book does is it does dramatize probably as effectively as can be the alien nature of aliens. Like I think you probably bumped into this in some of your digging into the Fermi paradox. You get scientists all the time that are just like, they're aliens. Like we aren't going, like it's not going to be the kind of communication that you think is going to happen. It's going to be a lot like talking to a piece of paper or just something that we can't understand in any way. And I think he does about as good a job as you can do while still having a recognizable plot. Because of course, if we wander off into the direction of pure alien nature, the idea of narrative sort of dissolves. They're certainly opportunistic. But, I would also say, like, we have gotten to this moment of human success with Luo Ji destroying a star and destroying the planets that are around that star. And we learned that there's no way to tell whether or not those planets were populated or not. So he is suspected of a word that I'm sure was coined by Cixin Liu, mundicide, which is a hilariously mundane kind of word for something so terrible. Are they good or evil? Okay, I'm going to go out on a limb here. We can identify certain figures in history as bad enough that, like, generally historians and people are going to be like, okay, evil.
Yep.
Hitler, Stalin, a fair number of Pol Pot is going to be in there.
Sure.
Where you're sort of like, okay, these are people that have lost sight of what it means to be human. And I think that's why Cixin Liu brings that point up a lot. Mm-hmm. But the reason that we can make those claim about those people is because they are human. And I think one of the things that he is investigating is this idea of like, do morals cross, the boundaries of intelligent, sentient species? And that's a really interesting question. And I think that's what he is struggling with. So my answer, I am kind of ducking your question because I think that Luo does something that is, possibly horrible and possibly not a problem. But the fact that he was able to go there in the preservation of his species, brings up the old question, if it's my greater good and your death, who gets to call it good or evil?
I guess Sophon seems like she's being extraordinarily cruel in this moment. Although, when we learn that the Trisolaran fleet is once again diverted by the universal broadcast, she offers a little bit of assistance to humanity. And I think that's going to be a plot point that's developed a little bit farther down the line, too. So I think from the Trisolarans' point of view, they're doing something very similar to Luo, which is they're looking out for their own survival. And this is how they're going, to tame humanity. But they have changed their mind. They do love humanity. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, you were saying that they're, he's doing a good job, narrating an alien race while still having a plot. I think they're just like us. I think, look at the 1890s in the United States. You had a protracted war against indigenous Americans, Native Americans, basically to claim all of that Western territory, move everybody to reservations, put people into refugee camps. I mean, there are probably instances in Chinese history that are similar too. And we also, I don't think it's a coincidence that all of this is happening on Australia, another place
100%
with an indigenous population who has been displaced by a conqueror and destroyed, and then also celebrated by that conqueror. In the United States, in the American history, it is not like 10 years after Custer's Last Stand or something that you start, like, you have the American summer camping movement where all the camp counselors start emulating indigenous people, where the Indian, sort of the scout, the Indian brave who can sleep out at night with nothing but a knife and a hatchet and can live on his wits and start a fire, and even, the Plains Indians who can carry their lives on their back and move chasing the buffalo. All of that is being celebrated in American culture about 10 years after that conflict, was settled. And 20 years prior to that, according to white Americans, those people were a menace, a threat. Yeah. They were something like animals that had to be destroyed. And I think you're getting the exact same thing. The arrogance of the conquering colonialist, which the Trisolarans are, and the arrogance that also says, you guys have been coddled, and you're not living up to your own greatness, that was in the earlier example, and part of it, there's like this hazing quality to it, which is like, you guys have had it so easy. You've never had to eat each other in order to survive. We're Trisolarans. We've been eating each other for like 1 billion years, grow up, Earth, grow up, humanity. So I don't know. My own answer is I don't think they're particularly evil or good. I think that Cixin Liu is showing us that people, be they humans or Trisolarans, are capable of great evil and great good. And often the same people are capable of great evil and great good too. And I'm not disagreeing with your point about the relativism, but I also think I think that Sophon is behaving in an evil way in this moment and in a cruel way. But that just makes them more like us.
Yeah, and I think that to me that is the answer to the question that Cixin Liu is posing in this trilogy. Which is we just keep seeing this over and over again. The similarity of I mean, even the whole dark forest idea is what you just said writ large on a galactic scale.
Yeah.
Where it's like, no, we got to look out for ourselves, and we're gonna do these terrible things, and then if the culture is close enough, appropriate it.
Yeah, I mean, he says that this is not an analogy, that he's spending time in the imagination, and there's a certain amount of that because we're bouncing these interesting physics ideas, but I don't think this book, there's no way this book would have been written by somebody who didn't grow up during the Cold War,
Totally.
I mean, what is deterrence but not mutual assured nuclear destruction? We all, you and I are a bit young for that, but we can remember the tail end of it. But our parents grew up when that was the reality of life. And then, we can remember the 1980s where they're like, oh, we're going to be friends with Russia. And now we see where that dream is.
Yep.
The other thing I'll point out, and this is horrific, but I read a story in Haaretz, the Israeli newspaper, a couple of weeks ago, where several IDF soldiers, whistleblowers, basically said, yeah, we've been ordered to use live fire on Palestinians as a crowd control measure to keep them from swarming the food relief. And it was reported as a sort of murderous live fire. The way the soldiers describe it was not so much the intention of murder, but incredibly irresponsible and reckless. And to be clear, these are soldiers who are whistleblowing. They're saying this is wrong. We shouldn't be doing this. So that's to their credit. But that they're essentially being asked to, they're being Sophon, chopping off a few heads until everybody lines up. I mean, the book was written 15 years ago, but there's certain ways in which history continues to rhyme, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think that every novel is an analogy.
Right.
Every novel is a metaphor.
Right.
It is a compressed bolus of information that is intended to communicate something.
Yeah.
And our first version of it is epic poetry, which is essentially a handbook for young male behavior. This is how you're supposed to be in the world. And, I just, similarly to you, as I'm reading the book, I just keep, my brain keeps crying foul on the, I don't allegorize, I don't, this isn't figurative. And I'm and I think your point that he probably has to toe the line.
It could be that, and also it could be that these are subconscious allegorizing, right? What he's thinking about is physics and fourth dimensions in the dark forest, but then he's like, oh, well, I know what it's like when you don't know the mind of your enemy and it can destroy you, because I grew up with that. I grew up around that. Not that China was necessarily part of mutually assured destruction. I guess they were. I don't know. It's funny. You don't really think of the Cold War. You don't really think of China as the adversary during the Cold War, even though maybe it's because they didn't have the military might of the Soviet Union in the 70s and 80s. But shall we do some trivia?
Let's do some trivia.
You are the host. You're
so
blinded.
You are up. It's coming back.
All right, I'll try to make it quick.
I'm worried. I could adjust my scheme, but I'm afraid that will cause a toppling.
Maybe you just adjust your ski mask for trivia too. Well, I'll be quick then. So I was doing some reading about this novel, and there is a key element of the novel, Death's End, where something was just lost in translation from Chinese to English. And something kind of big, something kind of important, kind of profound, and also, in my mind, kind of funny, too. So, was it that Yun Tianming's name means one who is favored by heaven, or even the phrase mandate of heaven, which is something we've learned about from Chinese history, that Tianming has a meaning mandate in heaven. That's A. B, the Earth Security Force, the ESF, which is the force of humans who work for the Trisolarans during the Australian genocide. The Chinese word for them was the Diqiu Anbao Budui, which was the same name the Chinese gave to the occupying Japanese army during the Sino-Japanese War who perpetuated the rape of Nanking. Or C, the title, Death's End, is an imperfect translation of the Chinese title, which actually means something quite different, and something more like Only Death is Eternal. Or D, the original novel refers to the ring-like tomb, not as the tomb or dimensional fragment, but as the ring world.
As soon as the ring appeared, I was like, "Oh man, this is gonna throw our trivia into a party." Oh wow!
Need him again?
No, I think I've got it. C sounds great. C is my favorite. I love the backwards. Yeah, I love it when translation ends up doing the opposite of what it's supposed to do. I'm going to go with B.
The Dichio Ambao Bodhi. No, it is in fact that Death's End is an imperfect translation of the title, which really does mean something like Only Death is Eternal. And apparently just Tor thought Only Death Eternal was a bummer of a name. And they're like, can you get something that has the same spirit, but it's a little more hopeful?
That's amazing. That's incredible. That's great. I'm happy that that's what it is. I'm also happy that it is not B. That sort of feels
laying it on a bit thick.
It would be. There are some moments where he does that, so it's like.
There's even this moment where, so the Australia is called a reservation, and then if you missed it, there's some narration where maybe it's from the history where they're like, of course, the word reservation reminded people of the indigenous people of North America. And I'm like, was that necessary? Maybe it's necessary for Chinese readers, but like I pretty much picked up what you were getting at when you called it a reservation.
Yeah, like that work was done by the word. Okay, I spent a lot of time thinking about the incredibly difficult position that Luo Ji and that Cheng Shen find themselves in.
Right.
And I got to thinking about ICBM missile operators.
Oh, yeah.
And just how difficult their job is and the ways that you would have to get through a job like that. So there is an American ICBM launch site that has a macabre slogan painted on its launch doors. In my opinion, reflecting the gallows humor that would be necessary to get through those jobs. Is that slogan and logo A copy of the Domino's pizza logo with the phrase "worldwide delivery in 30 minutes or less, or your next one is free"? B, a near copy of the McDonald's Golden Arches with missiles meeting at the center of the M with the phrase "billions and billions served" with the "served" in quotes. C, the character of Wendy, a mushroom cloud rising out of her iconic collar and surrounded by her two red pigtail braids with the phrase "it's better nowhere" below it.
Jesus. The last one is so weird. I thought one of them was going to be something like, you shoot them, we scoop them, or you launch them, we raunch them. One of those like rhymes. You do it, we do that. I'm just going to go with which one I think is the funniest joke, which is the first one. Worldwide delivery in 30 minutes, so your next one is free. That is sick, twisted, and hilarious. And I'm guessing A.
You are correct. Way to go.
Good job, ICBM operators. Way to make a terrible joke out of your terrible job.
I know. And then like I'm also imagining like like, you know, they have a lot of downtime. One of the things
it's all
that
downtime,
they,
right? Like, I mean, I guess you have to do drills every now and then, or like, we got to clean the silo or check the fuel
or go
level.
outside and paint a gigantic Domino's logo on the doors. And I'm just imagining the scene of like, how do we get approval for this? Like, the commanding officer is like, what the fuck? Why not? Go for it.
Wouldn't it be hilarious? Like, this could be a scene in this book of like where somebody on the deterrence squad misses the alarm because they're out painting the logo.
Yeah, totally.
Like, they're happily painting and they're all drinking beers, and then cut to inside, like, abandoned office, little red light blinking, and then like they had wired the PA to work outside, and cut to like mouse chewing through wire.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean,
so the world was destroyed.
There are these hilarious moments of comedy that bubble up every now and then. You sort of identified the fact that like maybe every now and then Cixin Liu writes like a little drunk, and like these kind of get through, or he reads them later and he's like, yeah, that's good enough. And it adds like a moment of levity. But yeah, I could 100% see that happening. But yes, that was fun. I was very proud of the billions and billions served one. And then the Wendy's one, yeah, I was like, yeah, this is so weird that only I could come up with it.
You know what? Like, when you said Wendy, I'm now realizing I was thinking you were talking about Wendy from Peter Pan, and I was like, oh yeah, she does kind of have a collar and her nightgown. And then I thought maybe I was like, that's really weird, like a mushroom coming out of Wendy from Peter Pan, and then doesn't she say it's better and better in Neverland, but instead it's better nowhere? But you're talking about Wendy Thomas, the daughter of Dave Thomas,
right? And then it's better here is the phrase.
Yeah.
You know, I love our trivia because I always learn something. Wendy's name was not Wendy. It was Melinda. And she could not pronounce it for a very long time. Like one of those things where, you know, like the kid is 12 and is still like, can't do the T's and C's.
Like you were probably like Quiz at one point in your life.
Yeah, exactly. And she couldn't do Melinda. And so I think it ended up being something like
Wendy.
Wendy.
Yeah.
And so there is no Wendy Thomas.
Well, there certainly wouldn't be after nuclear annihilation. That's really funny. Well, I mean, you know, maybe there's no Wendy Thomas. There never really was a Wendy Thomas. I mean, you know, it was always just like sort of Pippi Longstocking on acid.
I know, right?
Yeah.
100%. So weird.
I never really cared for Wendy's, although I think there was a time when maybe they had kind of like the freshest burgers around, like maybe in the late 80s, early 90s. There was a time where they were still kind of cooking patties on grills before going to kind of like pre-warmed microwave patties and things like that.
The gauge of the French fries is good. It's not the perfect gauge.
Don't they have like thick fries though?
They're a little thicker. Like if a McDonald's fry is like a 1/4 inch gauge, I would say a Wendy's fry is like a 3/8 of an inch. It's not a 1/2 inch gauge.
Interesting.
And usually they do that thing where they leave where like a few sides of the fry is a little darker than the other. It's not the completely uniform appearance of the McDonald's fries.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Maybe they even leave a little skin on.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, I'm in the same boat as you that it's sort of like there was a period where if you wanted like something a little better, you could get a pretty good bowl of chili and an okay salad.
Yeah.
But a Frosty and an order of large Wendy's fries together is a perfect slice of heaven.
Oh, okay. That's good to know. There was a period where I thought the McDonald's breakfast biscuit was really, really good.
Solid. Yeah, it's a good one.
Not so much anymore. I don't know if I told you this, but I briefly, for about 6 months, worked in a McDonald's that was the last of the flat grill McDonald's in Charlottesville. So it had been built, I believe, in the 50s or 60s in the old style, and it had been built into the indoor mall. So unfortunately, it's gone. But it was a cool restaurant. You know, we cooked I had 2 giant grills on which at some points I would be cooking like 48 cheeseburgers plus like 3, 6 quarter pounders plus 2 special orders, all at once. And I definitely got some grill dog moves from those times. That was kind of a cool restaurant, you know.
Yeah,
we made real food.
Right. There's a periods of McDonald's history where you're like, no, this rocked.
Yeah.
This was like the expression of the American short order cook. Like, and now, like, you know, everything it has been, you know, I mean, like, this is what happens when you turn good things into commodities.
Yep. Food. Also, look at the interior of 80s McDonald's, and like they were so lush and orange, and those are gone. Now they look like Starbucks. These like, they look like sort of like if Christian Grey was going to like order fast food from the lobby, like what his ideal restaurant would look like.
Oh my God, that's great. That's
you know what
amazing.
I mean?
I hope
like
I don't edit
you walk
this one,
in, like
I will definitely pull that moment.
You're like there's a little like there's everything's clean and sort of wood paneled, and there's a screen, and you take what you want, and then the people sort of like hover out of your shot, and they call your number, and you walk up and get it, and then you know like go into your car and spank Dakota Fanning.
Yeah.
With your
I mean, that last part is not part of the Great Middling, but now
I haven't seen that movie. It's just how I imagine.
It takes this like wonderful, like sharp right-hand turn away from like contemporary ennui into like, oh, what the fuck?
Okay. Yeah, I call it. It's like Target chic is my sort of generic term for this, which is this sort of
term
like
for it.
Sleek, plasticky, clean modernism that took a kind of interesting version of modernism, international style, like late 60s or, you know, modernism, and then just like sucked all the soul out of it.
Yep.
And anyway, I got to cook some food. We got to read some credits. So next time, everybody, is part 2 of this book. And Chris Bagg, I can tell you that there's some really amazing things in part 2 of this book, too. The action continues. And we have to figure out what happens to poor Yun Tianming's brain, if nothing else.
Yeah, I am looking forward to the very post-human sort of section of this book. Because when that was happening, I was like, oh, shit, post-humanism? I'm here for this. Mm-hmm. And Upper Middlebrow is a Small Point production. Chris Bagg and Jesse Dukes keep sending our universal broadcasts out there every 10 days or so. Music by Ben Pajak and Jesse Dukes. Design and website by me, Chris Bagg. We are supported by Jenny Grieve and Justin Reich. Thank you guys so much. And you can find us on Patreon, the rest of you, where there are a number of tiers at which you could show your support.
And a reminder, Chris Bagg and I are both writers and editors and can help you with your writing, podcasting, or editing project. You can see some of our portfolios and learn more at our respective websites, chrisbagg.com and jessedukes.com. Thank God we bought those domains back in like 1998 or whenever we did.
Yep, sure.
Mine was probably like 2003 or something like that.
Yeah, I beat out the other Chris Baggs to their dismay, but one of them beat me to the Chris Bagg Instagram handle. So